Jean-Bédel Bokassa, the self-proclaimed emperor of the Central African Empire, stands as one of the most brutal and notorious figures in modern history. His reign was marked by violence, cruelty, and an insatiable hunger for power. Perhaps the most chilling of his actions was the claim that he not only indulged in extreme acts of cruelty against his enemies, but also engaged in the gruesome practice of cooking and serving war prisoners to his own soldiers. The atrocities he committed have left a permanent scar on the history of the Central African Republic, and his name is forever associated with a reign of terror that echoes through time. Born on February 22, 1921, in the village of Bobangi in French Equatorial Africa, Bokassa's early life was shaped by the harsh realities of colonial rule. His father, a member of the local royal family, was a figure of some authority, but his family's lineage did little to protect him from the oppressive conditions of French colonialism. At the age of 18, Bokassa joined the French army, where he served as a soldier in World War II. This experience, combined with his aspirations for power, would lay the foundation for his brutal rise to prominence. After World War II, Bokassa returned to Africa, where he found himself drawn into the political upheaval that swept across the continent in the mid-20th century. The Central African Republic, then a French colony, was on the verge of gaining independence, and Bokassa saw an opportunity to position himself as a leader in the new order. In 1966, he seized power in a military coup, overthrowing President David Dacko and declaring himself the new leader of the country. Initially, Bokassa presented himself as a reformer, claiming to champion the cause of the African people and to oppose the exploitation of his country by foreign powers. However, it quickly became apparent that his rhetoric was little more than a mask for his authoritarian tendencies and unbridled ambition. He established a military dictatorship, consolidating power through a mixture of manipulation, fear, and violence. As his grip on the country tightened, so too did his cruelty. In 1972, Bokassa declared himself Emperor of the Central African Empire, an event that shocked the world and revealed the true scale of his egomania. The coronation ceremony, which cost an exorbitant amount of money, was a lavish affair, complete with a golden scepter, a custom-made imperial crown, and the extravagant display of wealth. This ostentatious display of grandeur was in stark contrast to the poverty and suffering of the Central African people, many of whom lived in dire conditions under Bokassa's rule. While the country struggled with famine, disease, and a crumbling economy, Bokassa spent vast sums on his personal luxuries, further alienating himself from the populace. Bokassa's reign was characterized by an insatiable thirst for power and a deep-seated paranoia about his position. He surrounded himself with a network of loyalists and advisors, but his mistrust of those around him led to brutal purges and executions. One of the most infamous aspects of his reign was his habit of punishing those he saw as threats with extreme cruelty. Dissenters were often tortured and executed, their bodies displayed as a grim warning to others. The emperor's cruelty was not limited to political enemies, however. His reign was marked by a complete disregard for human life. One of the most chilling and widely discussed acts of Bokassa's cruelty was his alleged involvement in the cannibalistic practice of cooking and serving war prisoners to his own soldiers. According to reports, Bokassa would capture prisoners during military operations and then have them prepared in a gruesome feast for his troops. The prisoners were allegedly slaughtered, cooked, and then served as meals to the soldiers, who were often unaware of the true nature of the meat they were consuming. These acts of barbarism were not isolated incidents, but part of a larger pattern of grotesque behavior that defined Bokassa's rule. The exact details of these claims are difficult to verify, as much of the evidence is anecdotal, coming from former soldiers and witnesses who were later exiled or silenced. However, the accounts of those who lived through Bokassa's reign suggest that these practices were not only possible, but were, in fact, a terrifying part of life under his dictatorship. Some former soldiers who defected from his regime later described the emperor's cruelty in chilling terms, recounting how he would often demand that prisoners be executed in the most brutal ways imaginable. It is said that he would order his soldiers to impale prisoners on stakes or hang them in public as a form of entertainment. In addition to his cannibalistic practices, Bokassa's reign was also marked by widespread human rights abuses. He established a secret police force that was tasked with rooting out dissent and maintaining control through fear. Torture, executions, and disappearances were common, and those who opposed Bokassa's rule were often subjected to horrific treatment. His government was known for its totalitarian tactics, which included strict censorship of the media and the suppression of political opposition. Anyone suspected of disloyalty was swiftly dealt with, often in the most violent and public manner possible. Despite his brutal methods, Bokassa managed to maintain power for a significant period. However, his reign began to unravel in the late 1970s. His extravagant spending, combined with his increasingly erratic behavior, alienated both his people and the international community. In 1979, he was overthrown in a coup led by French-backed forces, and the Central African Empire was dissolved. Bokassa fled into exile, where he lived for several years in France before returning to the Central African Republic in the early 1990s. Although he was briefly imprisoned, he was eventually released and lived out his final years in relative obscurity. Jean-Bédel Bokassa's legacy is one of terror and cruelty, a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the potential for violence in the pursuit of absolute control. His reign stands as a testament to the horrific extremes to which a dictator will go in order to maintain power, and the shocking depths of depravity to which he can sink. The claim that he cooked and served his enemies to his soldiers may seem like a grotesque legend, but it is a chilling reflection of the brutal nature of his rule. Bokassa's name will forever be associated with one of the darkest chapters in the history of the Central African Republic, and his reign serves as a haunting reminder of the consequences of unchecked authoritarianism.